Welcome back to the show, Shelby. You are listening to the podcast, Not Just a Pony Ride, which is the exclusive podcast for the equine assisted services community. And it's for everybody, instructors, administrators, public that just want to know more about what we do, partnering with horses to help others. And today we are talking directly to maybe those equine managers, equine operation managers out there, or program directors, people that are helping to buy horses, retire horses, and get good horses for your program, right?
Yep, that's what we're here for.
Okie dokie. So, Shelby, I have a question. What do we do when we have to retire Steady Eddy? We all have him.
We do, and that's one of the hardest things about our programs, right? Steady Eddy is Steady Eddy. You can count on him every single time. Unfortunately, they cannot work forever. So here at Hetra, we have a really unique situation where sometimes we're able to step Steady Eddy into our primary ground programming. So they might move from the riding program to the ground program. And that's really the ideal situation, but sometimes that's not always possible, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we have too many health concerns. Maybe they are not appropriate for ground programming. Maybe just from an age standpoint, they're really just ready to retire. So there's a lot of different things that we can do when we have to retire Steady Eddy. So our ideal situation when we do have to retire a horse completely from our program is hopefully they can go back to the home they came from.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of times when we take horses on our lease paperwork and our donation paperwork states that the horse will come back to their original owner. And that's really the ideal situation. They get to go someplace we know they're going to be cared for, that they've been cared for usually a lot of their life. So that's really the ideal situation, is to be able to send them back to their original owner.
So just really quick, tell us a little bit about, so Hetra does kind of a combo for our herd. We take some in on lease, some are donated and some are purchased, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So have you ever had anybody go to lease or donate us a horse and not be able to agree to that part of the contract?
I've never had anybody not agree to that part of the contract on the front end, but I've had multiple times where we get to the end and they just either aren't willing or aren't able to take the horse back. So sometimes horses tend to stay at Hetra for a long time, which is great. But if we signed the lease contract 10 years ago,
right,
they might just be in a different situation. They had a farm, they sold their farm, they, whatever that might be, they can't afford to board, whatever that might be, they just can't afford that, or they don't have the resources anymore. So in those kinds of situations, what we try to do is really dependent on the horse and the situation they're in. So if it's a horse that maybe they're retiring from our program for, they are having behavior issues or whatever that might be, they're not fitting our program anymore, but they still have the ability to work in another job, or maybe they could go have a second career as a trail horse or whatever that might be. Those horses, a lot of times we'll look at, do we have someplace that we could either, if the horse has market quality and market has high market value, could we sell that horse? Could we use those funds then to go buy something that would be a better fit for our program? Or if maybe the horse is a little bit older, we don't want them to get passed around. We're going to look at, do we have somebody that we know, we trust, that could take good care of that horse? And sometimes that might be a volunteer who they do some trail riding and they've got a place of their own, and we know they're going to take really good care of the horse, and they take them and just kind of take over care. Other times, if the horse has more medical issues or we can't find that, then a lot of times what we'll do is we'll end up retiring them with like a staff member that has a place of their own to keep them, but Hetra will continue to pay for their feed if they need any medications, things like that, and Hetra will continue to pay for that through their retirement.
So that's kind of the last, ideally, once our horses retire, we'd like them to get off the payroll, right? But that's if we can continue, kind of weigh the pros and cons, right? Of like having them go to a good home, but continuing to pay for their care is a much better option than maybe taking them somewhere that's not as reputable or they're not going to be cared for.
Right. And that's absolutely something we never want to do. And I think is pretty universally true of our industry. None of us want to take a horse to something that's not ethically responsible. So really vetting where those horses are going is a big part of that. And making sure that that person is going to help upkeep their care. If they can't financially afford their upkeep, then figuring out how can we help that. So at Hetra, we just started this year actually a fundraising campaign that we call our 401 Hey program.
Yeah, the retirement 401k. Look at us go.
So we have our 401 Hey that is pretty unique and allows people to donate to the care of those retired horses that we do still have on our payroll. Because currently right now we have 2 on our payroll right now who are completely retired. They don't live on site anymore. They live with staff members that are taking care of them, but Hetra is still providing financially for their care.
And, I think that people shouldn't be afraid to start something like that, because if you look at some of those horses that really truly are Steady Eddies we recently retired someone or a horse that had been in our program for
16 years.
16 years. Like, he's touched a lot of lives, a lot of volunteers' lives, and everybody wants to see those horses be comfortable and succeed and enjoy their retirement, right? So I think that that's definitely something that's more than appropriate.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a pretty easy sell for volunteers to want to donate to, or families want to donate to. So like our 401 Hey, when we retired this horse a couple months ago, we've had families that he touched lives for 16 years. He's worked with a lot of the people that are still in our program. And so we've had families that have been willing to donate to his care and things like that. And so that's been really good for him. And now he lives out and just gets to be a horse and putts around, and
he's enjoying
retirement. Yeah, he really is. He really is.
So talk to me about some things that might lead up to retirement, or we might, we've got these guys, they've been here forever, we've been caring for them, but what's a good indicator that retirement is the next step?
Well, there's a few things. So let's start with a situation where maybe it's not a age or medical retirement. Maybe it's a burnout retirement, or they're ready to move on to a different job. So those indicators would be horses being increasingly unhappy with their daily job, or increasing in the intensity. If if they are starting to bite people reliably at the mounting block, if they're starting to have some spooks, if they're wanting to refuse approaching the mounting block, things like that are going to be things we watch really closely. And we're going to dive into that, especially depending on the horse's personality. If it's a horse that's been here for a long time and we start to see changes in their behavior or their happiness with their job, we're going to try to delve into that a little bit and start with, is this a pain? Is there pain, right? So as our horses age, they're just like us. This is usually our horse's second, third, fourth career. So if something changed, is their back sore? Do we need to change something with their shoeing? Do they have ulcers? That's a big thing with horses, is ulcers. And so we're going to kind of dive into that and see if we can find a reason for that change in behavior. If we can't find a reason for that change in behavior, then we're going to start thinking that this horse is just telling us they're unhappy with their job. And you guys have all heard me say it before. If they're not happy, they're not safe. And we can't afford to have that in our industry, horses that are unsafe. So if horses are just not happy with their jobs here, then we're going to look at moving them to someplace they're going to be happy.
And those horses are likely ones that have maybe some resale value or something else to go to a different job, right? They still have, athletically, physically, ability to do so. We just have to find the right job for them.
And that one thing at Hetra that we've really moved to in probably the last 5 years is not taking horses on donation or purchase that would not hold up on resale value. So we're not going to take a horse or buy a horse that's 18 or 20 on donation or purchase. We might take that horse on lease, as long as we know if they only work for 2 years and they have to go home, they're going to have a home to go to. But we really try to avoid taking those horses on donation or purchase. And we're looking more at the horses in the 10 to maybe even 15 age range for donation and purchase, so that if they really do only work for a couple years, then we do have the opportunity to find them another home that they could have another job, and have some quality of life in another career.
Right. We also do With our leases, don't we do something where it's like,
so we actually, like a trial period.
Yeah, like a trial period.
We actually went away from trial periods a couple years ago. And the reason for that was it creates a lot of paperwork on the back end, and we don't always know.
Right.
And, I can't tell you, some horses we're going to know in 30 or 60 days if they're going to work or not. But some horses were not. And some horses, we might have for 6 months and then they decide this isn't the job for me.
Right.
And so we kind of went away from that in our lease paperwork. And essentially what our lease paperwork says is Hetra has the right to terminate the lease at any point, and the owner is given 2 weeks to find home, a place for that horse to be. Obviously we're not like, I'm dropping it off and tying it to your doorstep in
right.
2 weeks if you don't have it. But we really try to do that so that we have a reasonable amount of time to get that horse moved. And the only reason that would change is if the horse is dangerous for whatever reason. And that, honestly, that's never happened. Well, it's happened one time.
Well, never say never.
It's happened one time. It was a very fluky thing, but that did happen one time.
Are you looking for a leg up in communicating more effectively with participants in your therapeutic riding and EAL lessons? Teaching Aids for EAS comes to the rescue with a range of more than 70 visual aids designed specifically for our industry. Each one has been designed by a PATH International certified professional who understands the unique challenges that we face inside and outside the arena. Visit teachingaidsforeas.com today to shop their range of fun, scalable, and affordable products, including flashcards, posters, activity boards, PEX cards, handheld cueing paddles, arena games, and more. They also work directly with instructors and centers to design custom products and solutions. As a special treat for my Not Just a Pony Ride listeners, use code HETRA, HETRA, for 10% off your order now through May 10th at teachingaidsforeas.com.
And then on the other side of that, what we would find is the owner has the right to terminate the lease at any point, but we ask that they give us 60 days notice. So, and we ask that because if that horse is carrying a workload, we want to have adequate amount of time to replace that horse so that we don't have participants that aren't able to come for services because their horse is no longer here. So if we were to have a situation where, say, the horse is still in training, they've only been here for a couple months and they're still in training, the owner contacts us and says, hey, I changed my mind. I want my horse back, or my granddaughter just moved in with me and we want the horse back for her to ride, whatever that might be. If the horse is still in training, generally we'll just say, yep, no problem. We can get her moved because there's no sense in us keeping her for another 60 days if she's not working. Yeah. But if they are working, we ask that they give us 60 days to replace that. And most horse owners are really reasonable about that because they know the work they're doing here is meaningful. And so they're usually pretty respectful of that on the other side.
Right. Okay, so let's talk about if we've got a Steady Eddy that is just ready for plain old retirement. What kinds of things might we be looking at, or signs might we be looking for in that case?
I think in those situations, we're really looking at just overall health and quality of life. So if we're having a lot of soundness issues or other health issues that might come with age. So things that we've seen here at Hetra, we've seen kind of like recurrent GI issues. So trouble passing manure, or maybe just kind of general mild colic, nothing major, but kind of recurring mild colic. We've seen back pain is one. I would say back pain is probably the one that causes kind of age-related retirement the most in our program, is a horse that we just aren't able to keep their back comfortable to do their job. And so that's, at that point, we're going to look at retirement.
And we have a robust conditioning program that we develop those muscles and maintain. And honestly, we have guys working in our program that, into 29 and beyond and are in great shape, because of that. But you just get to a point when you just get plain old.
Yeah. They do. They really do. And that happens. If we have a horse that their back gets sore one time, we're not going to retire them because their back got sore one time. But it's something we're going to manage. And if we're starting to see like we've lowered their weight limit, we've checked the saddle fit, we've done acupuncture, chiropractic, whatever modalities that you prefer to use. And we're still seeing some kind of recurrent back soreness, that's going to be a sign to us that the back's just done. It's ready to retire. It can't take a rider anymore. And so those are going to be the horses that might go to the ground program, but they might also just from a quality of life standpoint, they might just be ready to retire. Like they might just, be ready to go out and get to live in a big green pasture and have some free time.
That's right. So when you transition horses like your Steady Eddy that are seeing 10 participants a week, let's just touch on this really briefly, because this is where that equine strategic planning comes in. And I'm going to share, we're launching that webinar today, and it was absolutely incredible. So do you want to give sort of the cliff note on like why that's important and how that plays a role into when you're looking at horses for retirement?
Yep. So here at Hetra, we currently have 32 horses in our herd. We have some minis that obviously we don't do any riding with the minis right now, but we do have 28 horses in our herd. And it's really important that we know which horses we categorize them green, yellow, and red. So who are our green light horses? These horses, they're young, they're healthy. We're currently having no soundness issues with them. They're green light go. They can, keep working. We're not anticipating that horse is going to be leaving us anytime soon. Now, that's not to say they can't, because they're horses and, silly things happen. But those horses, for the most part, are green light. So when I'm looking at those horses, we're not really planning for a replacement. Right. There could be a time where we say, okay, Sissy carries her max load of riders and everybody still is requesting Sissy, so we need to look for a second one, but that's not necessarily because she's ready to retire. Then we have our yellow light horses these are the horses that are maybe in their upper teens, or we're dealing with some mild soundness things that we're having to manage, or health issues, or it could be to like, this horse is newer to our program. Maybe they are young and healthy, but we're still in like, is this going to be a real career for them? They're working well, but maybe this isn't going to be a 15-year long thing, kind of there are yellow light horses.
Kind of those horses that it wouldn't shock you if they
choose they want to do something different. Yeah. So that's okay too. And then our red light horses are going to be our horses who we are planning to retire. Like if they get to a red light for us, this is like 12 months or less. We're planning for this horse to no longer be with our herd, whether that be age related, whether that be soundness related, whether we know that the owner is having some life changes, they're moving to Michigan and they want to take their horse with, whatever that might be. Those are going to be our red light horses that we're really planning. We need a backup plan. We need a plan because they probably are carrying a caseload, and we want to make sure that those participants can still have services with that horse. So our horse team then is really looking at, do we have anybody that's green light, new to our herd, that could potentially pick up that caseload? Anybody that we have in training that could potentially pick up that caseload? Or is this horse in a really unique niche and we need to go out and we need to find something that can fit that caseload? And then we do some really targeted asks out to our community. Hey, we're looking for a horse that's 15-2 and able to carry this kind of, whatever that might be. We're doing some really targeted asks.
Right. And all of this is based on, so she has our horse team uses this chart that has everything listed on there as far as like what that horse is currently doing, how much it costs to feed and care for them, and all of that. And all of that information goes into deciding what color, these horses are, and if they're going to stick around, and how we plan for that. It's a pretty detailed chart. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share that chart with our Patreon subscribers. If you're a Patreon subscriber, head over there and check that out. It's really, really cool how much our horse team, how much thought they put into it and how much detail goes into it. And then, of course, that webinar, Equine Strategic Planning, is going out today. So if you want to learn more about that, how you decide which horses are kind of pulling their weight, quote unquote, and who you should keep and who you should maybe not, and how you plan for that, I will link that in the show notes. And you guys can enjoy that.
One final thing I want to say, Katie, too, going back to that, and I talk about this at length in the webinar, is a lot of times we have horses who maybe they are pulling their weight. They're seeing 10 or 12 riders per week. They're kind of maxed out. They're really awesome, but they're costing us $10,000 a year in medications and vet work and feed or whatever that is. And we go into detail on every single one of that. We know exactly how much every pound of grain that horse ate for a year cost us, how much every flake of hay costs us. And we break that all down for every horse so that we know exactly where that's at. And then as an organization, you have to make that choice and that decision of, can you financially afford to pay $10,000 a year for a horse because they are pulling their weight? Or do you need to look at retiring that horse strictly because they're costing you too much money?
Right. And then that goes into too, kind of what we talked about finding them a good home and having to keep them on your payroll, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if we can't afford to hemorrhage that cash when they're not in the program, and that's something that we all have to take into consideration.
Yeah. And I do think there's a lot of options for those horses. If you are in a situation where you have a horse like that, when that horse retires out of programming, there's probably things that it could go without and maintain quality of life.
Right.
So if we've been doing annual hock injections and they've needed to stay in shoes on all 4 feet and they're getting a monthly chiropractic adjustment and things like that, there's probably things that if they're going to go putz around a field, they probably don't need hock injections every year.
Right.
They probably don't need maybe they need to keep their front shoes, but they probably don't need the hind shoes. They probably aren't going to need a chiropractic adjustment to comfortably walk around a pasture at leisure. So a lot of times you can decrease those expenses significantly if they move to just kind of a life of leisure rather than having a job.
Right. And in cases where, unfortunately we get to the point where we can't maintain quality of life, there's options too.
There are. And I think that's a big thing for us as an industry. We do a lot of times get horses towards the end of their lives. And I think it's hugely important that we make sure that we're making ethical decisions about those horses. The horse industry as a whole has a lot of eyes on it. And I think the EAS industry in particular gets a lot of attention from people who don't really know anything about horses. Right. And it's our job to make sure that the outside world understands ethical decision-making with horses. And when we get to a point where we don't have a quality of life, humane euthanasia it's not wrong. It's never wrong for a horse that doesn't have quality of life. And I think that's okay for people to say and to talk about, because I think sometimes it's a really ugly thing that people don't want to talk about, but also sometimes it's maybe the right choice.
Right. And just being aware of all the eyeballs that are on us all the time, and having horses that are later in life, there's things that come with that, and body changes and all kinds of things that we just have to educate about. That's our job. I mean, honestly, one of the best things we can do is just educate. Yep. So that's important too.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you for stopping by, Ms. Shelby. Yeah. I'm excited to share this webinar with the world, Equine Strategic Planning, because he made a huge difference for our organization and how we're able to, we're never in this like state of panic because, well, not to say never, but we have a good steady stream of horses in, horses out, and being able to keep our participants riding and participating in whatever capacity they are is ultimately what we're here for. So that comes down to the glue that holds our organization together, and that's the horses. So
absolutely.
Very good. Well, thank you, and we'll see you again soon. That's all for today. But until the next episode launches, scroll down to the show notes and click on the link to get plugged in with us on Facebook, Instagram, or our exclusive educational club at Patreon. This podcast is presented by Hetra University, the educational arm of Heartland Equine Therapeutic Riding Academy in Gretna, Nebraska. Hetra University's mission is to provide high-quality educational offerings to the EAS community. Check out all the Hetra University has to offer at www.hetrauniversity.org.